Administrators call it a resiliency survey. At least one parent calls it government psychological profiling. I call it a bizarre, invasive, intrusive waste of time. Canadian parents know these surveys well. They've been given out to school children in various parts of the country for a dozen years now, asking the kids to agree, disagree, or stay neutral on statements like, "I'm worried about my future." They're asking 10-year-olds this. "I like who I am, and I'm special to others." This year was the first year that all 126 schools in the Toronto District School Board took the survey. Parents, not happy. One complained that her child had never considered questions like that before and really was worried about her future now. At least 4 accused teachers of telling the students they'd fail if they don't answer. Hard to believe because nobody fails for stuff that really matters anymore. Now the educrats say they do this to determine the well-being of the kids in their districts. Here's my question. How is it any of their business? And why are they ignoring parents once again? That's not even co-parenting. It's relief parenting. It's substitute parenting. For more, let's go to Sun News reporter Kris Sims in Ottawa. Kris, one of the questions has to do with bathrooms. Johnny, Janie, are you scared to go to the bathroom? Now, my take on this is, what is the 10-year-old supposed to do? Think that maybe there's some kind of serpent in the toilet that she's being warned about? 126 questions of 9, 10, 11-year-olds. What's your take, Kris?
Wow, Charles, that one was new to me. I must have missed that one when I was reading through some of the top 10 lists on this survey. It's really quite strange. I know most parents that I speak to about this sort of stuff just really, at best they roll their eyes. At worst, they're quite concerned and quite worried as to why their children are being polled for this sort of thing. And we have to keep in mind these things weren't anonymous. These children's names were printed at the top of these pages, and then they were told, like you mentioned, in at least 4 cases, you'd better fill this out or you're going to fail grade 5. They were apparently told that by their teachers, although they're not naming who those teachers apparently were in Toronto. So it's very concerning to parents because, like you said, they're wondering, whose business is this? Why is it, like you say, educrats are wanting to know this kind of information, and not only wanting to know it in maybe more of a personal and interpersonal way because they're good teachers and they're sensitive and thoughtful and they get to know their students really well and they get to understand the children, but in order to have their name printed on it and all these checklists put on and then stick it in a filing cabinet forever? It's really startling. The one that really raised my eyebrows were things like, it was something to the effect of, do you feel all religions are treated equally? Is your religion treated properly? And for most 9 and 10-year-olds across Canada, and in Toronto even, I imagine, that would be kind of a head scratcher for them. Maybe they hadn't even thought of religious divides or religious differences until some teacher asked them. And, I'm all for teachers getting to know their students because, they spend a lot of time with pupils. If there are problems, hopefully they will surface and come to light through proper interaction. But what parents are concerned about is just this regimentation and the way it's very much a government program to try to get inside the heads of these kids.
By the way, on the failure thing, I said off the top, it's hard for me to believe. It's not hard for me to believe that some teachers implied, coercively that the kids might be punished or even fail. It's just hard for me to believe that it would ever happen because nobody fails based on lack of performance in math, science, English, you name it. I mean, can you imagine what would happen if some child in some public school somewhere in this country was failed because they answered the questions poorly, wrongly, indifferently, didn't answer at all? Can you imagine not failing a kid for subjects that matter and failing them on lack of performance on a survey?
That's right. You refuse to hand in your book report on time. You don't understand trigonometry, but you did. That's okay, but you didn't tick off a box as to whether or not you feel special in your house. Fail. If we come to this point, I think most Canadians have enough common sense to realize that this is kind of out there in the boonies of teaching. I don't imagine, I hope most educators don't feel this way. I had some amazing teachers who still have an influence on me to this day. They didn't hand out surveys like this, but you know what? The best ones would be able to pick out whether or not you were having a bad day because they're that good and they can talk to you as well as teaching you how to do long division.
You know, there were questions in there about, you know, how you get along with your parents or how you get along with people who are different from you religiously, ethnically, what have you. I think the average kid is going to try to fill out that survey the way average kids do a lot of things. You know, what do they want me to know? What do they want me to say? How do I just kind of stay out of trouble? I don't think these surveys elicit the truth. I think these surveys intimidate. And I guess what bothers me more than anything is the parents weren't even consulted about whether or not their child should be given a survey like this. I mean, don't you think the parent ought to have a look at the survey before the child is confronted with all these questions, some of which are difficult questions? And then if the parent signs off on it, then fine, we do the survey. Otherwise, forget about it.
Well, absolutely. But see, that's where teachers would say something like, oh, but how are you going to suss out whether or not there are true problems in the home if you're making, you know, a would-be bad parent sign off on something that is so potentially invasive? But really, teachers have been catching abuse now for generations. They've been picking up on stuff now for decades and decades. They don't need these print form surveys take home saying, you know, do you get along with your mom and dad? Do you feel special? Do you think religions are properly treated? They don't need that sort of thing. Most teachers I talk to say they don't need those sort of tools. This usually comes from school districts who want to, you know, I don't know, tune into their students' psyche rather than actually teaching them things. And I think that was really highlighted when we covered the Jesse Sansone story, when the bureaucrat said, you know, we're co-parents. He felt that way. He really did. Most teachers, I don't think, feel that way, but there's a certain set within the teaching industry, if I can put it that way, within education, that do really feel that way. And I'll go a step further, Charles, and say, you're right. I think a lot of students, especially at that age group, would just fill it out kind of like a water skimmer, right, across the top of the surface of a pond. They don't want to make any ripples or disturbances. They'll just say what, you know, their friends next door are saying or what they think they should say. But also, there's ones as they get on along further in junior high that start asking them sexual orientation questions very early on, you know, grade 7, grade 8. And those ones, you could imagine how those are treated in class. You know, most students treat them like a joke. So really it ends up with, is this a waste of time or is this a good use of school resources?
Wish we had more time. Always do, Kris. Thank you so much for the visit. We'll see you again next week.
You bet.